low IQ people, as you put it, which, by the way, is not what I would call black people. You know, me personally, that's not what I would call them, but you do. Okay, so you know, whatever. Okay, fine. Call them low IQ, I guess. You know, be racist. It's cool. It's the big 2026, right? Like, we're all, like, racist now, right? Anyway, the reason that low IQ people make better workers is because of the position that they are born into. And they do, right? Which makes them good for profits. They might not be good for profit in the particular way that you're talking about, which is having money and having disposable income and spending said money, but they literally produce the things that the people that you're talking about need to buy with their money. Welcome back. I am reacting to Mentis Wave today. It's called Woke Capitalism Is Not What You Think. I'm not really sure who this title is for, right? I don't know. Like, what are you trying to communicate to your audience, right? Of dumbass right-wing Christian nationalists. What, that it's not, like, the Jews doing it or something? Like, oh, no. The quote on screen, for those of you watching on YouTube, it says, "Big companies go woke to eliminate competition. After all, they can afford the cost to comply with woke regulations, whereas small companies cannot." And there is some truth to this statement, you know, when, you know, regulation, the fines that go along with it, when a large company can afford it, and it's basically a speeding ticket, then it's, you know, really only regulation for smaller companies that can't afford it. And that's a problem, okay? It should be, depending on what it is, it should be expensive for everyone, right? If you, like, for example, one of the more serious regulations would be, like, carbon emissions, right? And a company that can just dump as much carbon into the atmosphere as they want and still turn a profit, that's not right. That's not regulation doing its job, you know? But anyway, let's skip this intro. I don't want to hear it.
Hey internets, you may have heard of the
Mentos.
concept of woke capitalism. And in this video I'll be explaining what this theory is, why it's mostly a flawed theory, why it mostly gets most things wrong, but also what it gets correct. Because it's one of those interesting theories that's not necessarily...
Well, what is the theory? What the fuck is woke capitalism? There is no woke capitalism. Capitalism is anti-woke by nature. It exists to, enslave and oppress innocent people. And, you know, guilty people as well. It is designed to exploit as many people as it can get away with. That's what the system does.
Completely off the mark. It just doesn't always blame the right things for the problems that it identifies. And this is partly because the theory can be roughly divided into two different camps. The first camp is what you could call the light version of woke capitalism theory. These are the people who simply point out the phenomena of corporate virtue signaling and call it out as fake, and they simply identify the symptoms of woke capitalism, and they call it woke capitalism, but they don't really necessarily go much further than that. And then the other camp you have what you can call the full woke capitalism theory, which believes that capitalism inevitably leads to and causes woke ideology through consumer culture. This is a theory that...
It's not woke at all. It's all performance. Right? Performative woke is not woke. It's just not, like, you can put a fucking rainbow flag on your t-shirts at your retail store. That doesn't mean you're woke. Oh, wow, you don't want to kill all gay people, Mr. Shareholder. Wow.
That wokeness is actually inherent to capital, and that any capitalist system is inevitably doomed to show the symptoms of woke capital. And what's interesting about the full woke capitalist theory as opposed to the light version is that you can see it coming from both the dissident far right in some ways, but you can also see the same thing coming from the far left, specifically the outright communist stanky left. They both basically argue that capitalism and this aggressive push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all these brands, for example, adopting the pride flag to show their allegiance to this ideology, to show their support for DEI, they argue that all these things would just be, again, inevitable. And this idea comes with usually belief that wokeness is a postmodernist creation of capitalism.
Well, no. No. You're misunderstanding what leftists say about this, okay? What do leftists say about capitalism? They say that capitalism will commodify everything. Anything and everything that it can about your life. About your identity, about your work, your production, right? Your family, right? Any personal property that you have, capitalism will take that and it'll sell it back to you. Okay? That's what capitalism does all the time. Every day. At all times. All throughout history. All throughout the history of liberal democracy. This is what it's done. Now, in the early days of this country, of this system, the technology was limited, right? So we couldn't just produce any commodity, right? They were limited in what they could produce, so they couldn't just sell anything back to you. You know, that's what made the system, that's what made the system kind of work, right? It wasn't like this. It wasn't so dystopian like it is today. It was a great alternative to the systems that came before it, such as feudalism. Okay. Anyway, all that is to say, woke capitalism, if that's what you want to call it, isn't woke at all. It's just selling an idea back to you. Oh yeah, we love gay people. You love gay people too. Buy our rainbow pants and the rainbow shirt and the rainbow shoes, and wear them all over your body, all up on your body, to show how much you love gay people. You know, and it's silly. You know, it's all to turn a profit. That's my point. That's the point of leftists. Okay, all of this performance is just to turn a profit. It is for nothing else. It's to meet market demands, so they can turn a profit, and then they make the profit, okay, and then they take it.
Itself. That capital inherently breaks down the bonds of family and church and ethnic identity, etc., etc. And it does this as a scheme to turn people into these interchangeable worker bee types. And then it uses woke ideology to
okay. Right, dude.
Fill the void of those bonds that it has destroyed.
Yeah, that's what leftists are always saying,
virtue signaling to the DEI Church of Correct Think thus effectively becomes the new church, except it has been perverted and inverted all for the sake of seeking profits. And therefore they argue that capitalism will always inevitably lead to this type of society, a society of multiculturalism and identity politics and virtue signaling in favor of who the current victim.
Yeah, it will. Okay, and I'll tell you what, not for like woke reasons, right? And leftists don't say that either. They don't say like, capitalism is performative for the consumer, therefore it will always be woke, okay? It will always be like pro-immigration. Like, that's entirely separate. The reason that we do mass immigration is because it gives us a cheap immigrant underclass to exploit, because the system needs that for profit. Okay, because the CEO's got to get his 7th yacht renovation for the year. That's it.
Where corporations are constantly worshiping victimhood and pandering to the DEI victimhood narrative, effectively in order to just trick people into buying the product, as well as to trick the working class into constantly fighting amongst each other for who gets the victim status next. And it's this part of the idea of woke capitalism that is mostly incorrect. But before breaking down why it's incorrect, I'd like to thank this video sponsor. The reality is, if you are not using a VPN these days, you are susceptible to having your data for this system clean of viruses, in addition to shopping deals people. If you use my link in the description, so there's really the most important thing that it actually gets right, which is that woke capitalism is entirely fake. This is something that many people have noticed for years and years, but not everybody fully understands what it implies. Take this post from Conspiracy Reddit 4 years ago. Woke capitalism is all BS. American corporations claim to be all in for LGBT rights here, but they scrub all references to LGBT rights from their brands in China, and then of course he just repeats that it is aka all BS. And this is entirely true. They don't really believe the ideology. Some of them do. I'm sure they have many true believers working in many corporations, but a lot of it is very easily proven to be total nonsense, especially when you look at any company under the microscope. Like, for instance, let's just take Wendy's as an example. Here's Wendy's back 6 years ago on their main website, how Wendy's supports LGBTQ+ allyship. Got their little pride flag and celebrating Spirit Day. But do they really believe this? Do they actually care? A quick look at Wendy's executive leadership reveals that historically they've been relatively Republican leaning. And actually reading into what Wendy's claims they did to support LGBTQ+ allyship, it appears to be nothing more than lip service. It's very easy to say that you support certain things, but their actions amount to little more than just another form of advertising. And so the reality is, they probably don't care. The thing that Wendy's cares about as a corporation is to get people into their doors so that they will buy spicy bucks. And whatever mask they wear is just a means to that end. And so ultimately, it's just seeking profits, which gives you a hint as to what's specifically wrong with the woke capitalist theory. When you realize that it's all fake and that it's all essentially just an advertisement campaign, what's really going on starts to become a lot more clear. So I'll now go over a lot of the claims made by people pushing the hard woke.
Okay, you're not saying anything that like dozens of people haven't said before you. Why are you presenting this like it's unique? I don't understand. I mean, there's still like 20 minutes left in the video, right?
Theory to show you what I mean. Starting with the idea that woke capitalism is a plot to turn identity into a commodity and thus transform the populace into a legion of low IQ, low impulse control consumer cattle slaves. Then it's all just a big conspiracy that these guys behind closed doors have decided to play the long game. A future where a very small number of elites rule over a massive civilization of complete knuckle-dragging buffoons, who will simply consume product and then get excited for next product.
Wow.
And this is an interesting theory because there's definitely a little bit of truth to it.
Interesting choice of image.
Elites haven't been shown that they think this way. However, for saying that every single corporation is doing woke capitalism for this specific reason, it kind of starts to break down because there's a much more rational explanation. It is far more plausible that most of these corporations that went woke actually did so simply because fraudulent market researchers told them they should in order to pander to a woke audience. And so companies were simply marketing to what they believed the audience to be and what they believe the average person to believe. This is sometimes known as the myth of the modern audience. And the problem with it is that the modern audience doesn't really exist. It is entirely a construction of woke ideologues projecting their own beliefs onto the populace, and intellectuals who are true believers of the ideology then push it into various institutions. One of them, again, being market research, which is a huge rabbit hole that is worth its own video, but I'll just give you a TLDR here. From the early 2010s to roughly 2024, a lot of intellectual agencies pushed the claim that DEI would be good for business, that woke ideology infecting everything was simply what the customers wanted. And they used a lot of statistical fallacies and typical disingenuous tactics in their pitch, things like pretending to not understand that there's a difference between revealed preference and stated preference, or not controlling for just very obvious confounding variables, so things like comparing a film with a lot of wokeness in it to a film with very little wokeness, without also...
Look, intellectuals are good at predicting the future in their respective fields. Okay, mostly. Like, do they get stuff wrong? Yeah, and does it depend on the field? Sure. Okay, the study of whatever science we're talking about. But generally, they are correct. The problem is what you're describing here is actually social perception lags behind. Okay, so like the way it works is the researchers, right, the smart guys with the lab coats and whatnot, they predict, and their predictions are usually pretty solid because they follow, what do they follow? Mentis, wait, I just noticed my camera's kind of fucked up. They follow the scientific method, okay, which has bestowed us with this, with all of the commodities and the explosion of growth that our markets have seen in the first place, okay? And that's because they're good at predicting the future. They're good at predicting and crafting things, right? It's great. But the public, they don't, like, always agree at first. Like, you know, it's sort of like, I think where this is most apparent and most obvious, it's arguably applicable to, like, every science, right? It is, okay? But it's most obvious in sociology. So, like, sociologists a few years ago were, like, talking about gender and what gender is and how it's, like, a social construct. And that is something that people are kind of coming around to, but, you know, a lot of people are still behind on that front. And that's fine. You know, the same thing happened with gay people, okay? And you see the process. Most people were not very accepting of gay people 40 years ago, 50 years ago, right? But that's when they started to come around, you know, oh, like Elton John is cool, right? Like, we like Elton John. I love Crocodile Rock. I love that shit. Okay? And like, you know, people started to be like, okay, well, like, as long as they don't make it their whole personality, right? As long as they, or I should say, as long as they, like, as long as I never have to know that the person is gay, right, then it's fine, right? And then it sort of evolved into what we've seen more recently in the past, like, 10 years, which is as long as they don't make it their whole personality, right? And I think that eventually, if we do keep going in the right direction, right, the correct direction, unironically, then gay people will just, you know, be like completely normal people, and it won't be like this this weird thing like, oh, as long as they don't make it their whole personality, like, as long as they just never talk about it, you know, then I'm okay with it. And so that's what you're talking about here, like people that do market research, that look into what is approved by the public, and like how to craft marketing strategies. They are intellectuals, okay? They are the lab coat types, Okay, they are. Like, market research is kinda a science. Okay, or it is a science. And so I think that they are a little bit ahead of what the public is. And you saw this throughout the 2010s. Okay, you saw all this performative woke, and sometimes it went a little too far, and people were like, I don't know, buddy. I don't know. Are gay people really just like us? I don't know about that, okay? But that's just kind of the way it goes. That's just the way it is.
Comparing the budgets of those films.
That's
another
how
thing that's very
science
common is
be.
them just misrepresenting what wokeness is. They'll conflate it and compare it to things that aren't really woke, like conflating DEI ideology and woke ideology with simply the presence of minorities, which is actually not what woke ideology really is. And to make a very long story short, they lied. Woke ideologues that have managed to worm their way into Western intellectual institutions.
Yeah, I mean, true. I agree with that. DEI is about equality. Equality. That's what it is. It's about giving people who are brown the same opportunities as white people. Because historically and contemporarily, they have been shut out of opportunities that are given to white people. Interesting.
At the top of their lungs. They sold a pitch that woke would be good for business to corporate America, and it was complete 100% bogus. It was all a massive scam. And so most of corporate America just ended up injecting woke ideology into whatever their PR campaign was for the moment, because they believe that that's how society was. Corporations that are selling a product, corporations that have to actually engage in voluntary trade, well, they kind of have a strong incentive to always go with whatever they believe the dominant ideology of society is. And so they went woke.
Like, it's so crazy that he even has to clarify that, like, the presence of brown people in society isn't woke. Right, like the very fact that we allow them the great privilege of living in a country that exploits the fuck out of them every day. That's not woke. Right, it's so crazy to me.
They believe that was a dominant ideology, and corporate America believed that because intellectual institutions told them so.
But he does have to say this, right? Because like there are now maximalist groypers, right? There's now like purity testing in groyper communities, which, you know, there's a lot of overlap between them and someone like Mentis Wave. So he has to clarify that now.
Which then, of course, explains what's really going on. He just fully explains why they drop the woke ideology in countries where it's obviously not the dominant ideology. They're just advertising and changing their PR campaigns to match the views of what they think the plebs they're talking to believe. In other words, you could actually say that woke capitalism is really just how do you do, fellow kids, to Generation Z. And so for most corporations anyways, this is a much more plausible explanation than some multi-generational plot to turn everybody into mindless, cultureless, obedient cattle. And so woke capitalism is actually very much just a second order effect of the cathedral going woke, which went woke all the way back in the 1970s. Because woke ideology is really just the mindset of viewing any inequalities as being the result of some kind of malicious action. And thus it directs envy at the more successful.
No, it's not. No, that's not what woke ideology is. You're not even really close, but like the wording is kind of close. Okay? You completely missed the mark. But like if you change a few words there, then you have the actual reality. Okay? It's not that malicious action and evil bad people are pulling the strings and oppressing black people. Right? Don't get me wrong. There is some of that happening. But their actions, in and of the, even like evil people doing evil things, is a result of the system, which demands oppression, which demands a permanent immigrant underclass. Okay, do you understand? Do you understand? The system demands exploited labor. And so it gets it. That's how it works, man. It's not like evil people doing evil things. No fucking leftist says that. It's just that we live in a system, right? And the people in that system, they have incentives, right? Right-wing people, they love talking about incentives, right? And the actions of the many result in the oppression of the brown people, the immigrant underclass. That's it, man. It's just market, it's a market pushing people in a certain direction. So what leftists say is maybe we should change the system, and not to be more racist, right? Not to kill brown people, but instead like maybe to do equality, perhaps, maybe equality.
Society. And that's where my definition of wokeness comes in. It's to get this aggressive push for diversity and equity and inclusion, all based essentially on the equity fallacy. And envy directed towards more successful groups.
The equity fallacy.
It's something that's existed since the dawn of human civilization. It's a very, very, very old mindset. But woke ideology in its current form, what we call woke ideology and how it is actually practiced and what they believe, is really just the equity fallacy of globalism, which has its roots in the civil rights movement. And how ever since then it became taboo for anybody in academia to suggest that the reasons for inequalities were anything other than some form of discrimination. And this, of course, was going on and happening all way before we started seeing...
It is. What do you mean? It is discrimination. Do you think that discrimination is only malicious intent from bad people? Is that what you think discrimination is? Like, I hate this whole idea that conservatives peddle, which is like all racism is just white people leftists believe that all racism is just white people being mean, and leftists, they hate white people because they believe that white people are mean to black people. Okay, and it's like, no, man. You are so fucking stupid. You are so goddamn stupid for thinking that.
Capitalism is a long game by all these corporations to turn everybody into low IQ, low impulse control consumer cattle, is that it's not actually a very good long game. Low IQ populations tend to reduce economic growth overall. Sure, they're easier to manipulate, but that doesn't always necessarily translate into being a good consumer. Overall, it's actually the middle class that does the most consumption, along with the more educated upper middle class. Well, they're the ones who actually generate enough wealth to splurge on things. If people becoming low IQ consumer cattle was truly good for profits, then the GDP and consumption maps per capita would not also so closely match the world IQ map. As you can kind of think of it by putting yourselves in the shoes of a CEO of a large corporation, and let's just pretend that you're able to choose between one type of consumer. Consumer A has about $5,000 of disposable income per year. This is including credit, by the way. And
low IQ
of that $5,000 every year because they have no impulse control whatsoever.
I am not
racist. B, who has $50,000 of disposable income per year, but they will invest and save about 50% of that while only spending $25,000 a year on consumer goods. Which consumer would you rather have? It's pretty obvious that going with a population comprised with the mindset of B, of the latter consumer, would be better for your business overall. Or to put it very simply, a lower IQ society is actually bad for profits. And it's pretty easy to understand why. That being said, there are indeed people within our ruling elite that absolutely would love everybody to be low IQ, easy to manipulate slaves. And that, of course, is the state, which brings me to the next thing to refute. And this is something that comes a bit more from the far left tankies. They'll claim that capital is woke.
You know, it's funny that you say that, like, low IQ people make bad consumers. Okay. Well, you know what they also make? You know what they make good producers. They make good producers because low IQ people, as you put it, which, by the way, is not what I would call black people. You know, me personally, that's not what I would call them, but you do. Okay. So you know, whatever. Okay, fine. Call them low IQ, I guess. You know, be racist. It's cool. It's the big 2026, right? Like, we're all, like, racist now, right? Anyway. The reason that low IQ people make better workers is because of the position that they are born into. And they do, right? Which makes them good for profits. They might not be good for profit in the particular way that you're talking about, which is having money and having disposable income and spending said money, but they literally produce the things that the people that you're talking about need to buy with their money.
And for this, they will point to the regimes of Stalin and Mao Zedong, as well as even sometimes North Korea, which may appear on the surface to, not really follow woke ideology very much. At least in the way people in the West view woke ideology, you're not really going to see that in North Korea at all. And if you look in the past, if you look at the history of Mao and Stalin, well, they weren't exactly very big friends to LGBT or virtue signaling, the certain things that we tend to virtue signal about. However, this is short-sighted because it's taking the Western, current, modern-day manifestation of the woke mindset and then projecting that onto history, which doesn't really make much sense. When we look at it more from the framework of woke ideology being the essence of envy directed at the more successful groups, or just this general idea of inequality means that somebody cheated, well, then all of a sudden their regimes actually reveal themselves to be extremely woke. Both Stalin and Mao Zedong embody this more broad definition of wokeness through their core Marxist-Leninist ideology and how they governed. It was just less along identity politics lines of whether or not you identify with LGBTQ+ or whatever. They drew it more on class lines, with the sell that those who owned the means of production were exploiting the working class. Take, for example...
Okay, leftists in this country do that. And also, the idea that the communists in China weren't socially progressive is just... It's so delusional. Okay, it is. What the fuck are you talking about, man?
Solid. The world is divided up into two antagonistic camps, the camp of a small handful of capitalists and the camp
and like, the idea that the Bolsheviks weren't socially progressive is arguably equally as insane. I mean, they're from very different eras in their respective countries, right? Very different conditions. But like, what the fuck do you even say to that,
nevertheless, they remain poor. The capitalists do not work. Nevertheless, they are
like,
rich.
oh yeah, they didn't have woke capitalism, so I guess they were, they just like wanted to kill all gay people. Am I right?
This place not because the proletarians are unintelligent and the capitalists are geniuses, but because the capitalists appropriate the fruit of the labor of the proletarians. Because the capitalists
famously, if you're gay in China, they behead you, they chop your head off.
This quote from here is very much in line with the very essence of what woke ideology is. The claim that the haves only have because they stole from the have-nots. And this is a very useful message for the state, because the state can then sell to the people who they are telling are the oppressed group the idea that all they need to do is simply follow the state and give the state power and swear their allegiance to the government, and the government will then take care of them. That the state can then right this alleged wrong, thus justifying the existence of the state for entirely the purpose of redistributing the wealth. And so thus the government state dictator, they're the ones who very much have a very strong incentive to ensure the populace is a populace filled with people who belong to the victim class, whatever the victim class of the day may be. It doesn't actually matter how you divide people into different collective groups. What matters is that this false accusation of wrongdoing is being used to manipulate the masses. It's to trick people into thinking that they need the state to fix a problem that doesn't really exist. Another way that they were woke, especially...
Is the state capable of fooling people to give them power and then, you know, and then they do whatever the fuck they want? Yes. Yes. But new governments lack legitimacy. Okay? Like America, the United States government, has existed for a long time, right? In the eyes of Americans. And, you know, it is a pretty old government. You know, oh, the Chinese be like, oh, our country is 5,000 years old. Well, okay, how old is the government, though? You know, like, But, like, the longer these governments go on, the more legitimacy they have. And at some point, they start to get diminishing returns on that legitimacy. But that's the currency, or that's one currency that they operate in, is legitimacy. And time gives you legitimacy. Okay? Now, my point here is that a new government, it has less legitimacy, and therefore is more likely to meet the demands that they promised their people who gave them the power in the first place. Okay? That's how it works. That's how it works, man. Now, anyway, when we're talking about what the government will give us, right? Which they have to give us some things. That's why we have the government, right? Like Mentis, wait, what is the government for? Okay, to you, the government should construct a market for corporations to buy and sell bodies on. Okay, that's like your perspective, right? I think that a government, historically, and today as well, should and could provide people with things that they need. Okay, infrastructure, services, okay, through a collection mechanism, a taxing system, where we take from everybody a little bit, and we pool our money together, and then we build things, right? And we pay people to do things. Wow, right? So the question for the average person, the average working class person, is, what can my government give me? What can it give me? What am I paying for? And the answer in our country is, we're paying for Pedophile Island, okay, endless wars overseas, child murder, what else? Crumbling infrastructure, right? Paying for that. Non-existent healthcare that we could have, but we don't. That's what we're paying for in this country. Wow, what a great deal. Yeah. Let's not try to bargain anymore, guys. Let's let the government just give us less. And we probably end up paying the same amount, if not more, in the end, anyway.
Actually, Mao can be seen in how Mao's gone blame Chinese culture for a lot of the alleged ills. In fact, the entire point of the Chinese Cultural Revolution can be said to completely reform the identity of the Chinese people into that of obedient ideologues who would more properly follow Marxist-Leninist ideology. He specifically targeted the youth, and the entire point of the Red Guards was to wage a radical, extremist destruction campaign against what he called the four olds: the old habits, the old customs, the old culture, the old ideas. So more than just reform, it would best be called an entire purge. All of the Confucian traditions and religious practices and all the scholarship that it created, all of it was viewed by Mao during the Cultural Revolution as a part of the exploitation class. It was all painted as just another tool of oppression to the proletariat. And if you compare this to, say, the woke ideology of the West that we saw, and honestly, intellectual elites within academia still believe it, it's just less prevalent in advertising now because they no longer really believe that it's what the people want. But if you look back on that, a core ideology of it, specifically the anti-white racist element, it was effectively the exact same mentality as Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. What do far left socialist progressives...
Well, look, man. I get what you're saying, and look, I know it's been said so many times before, right? But the pendulum do be swinging, right? And I agree with you. I agree with you on that. Like, companies have noticed that woke is lame, woke sucks, people don't like it, so they're pulling back. But they're behind. They're behind because woke is back. Woke is back, and it's back in a big way, baby. We're woke 2.0. Woke 2.0, okay? People are loving wokeness right now. They are, dude, everybody is woke up to their eyeballs, from their eyeballs down to their toes on the ground, okay? They're woked up, and it's awesome, okay? I love it. But companies, corporations, they're still lagging behind. Most of them haven't figured it out. So you're gonna see them doing this whole, like, out of touch, performative, anti-woke bullshit for probably another year. At least until after the midterms, okay? But probably longer. Probably. Anyway,
the United States and other Western countries push. Well, they push this anti-white culture idea that white culture is inherently oppressive and that its ideas of rugged individualism are standing in the way of the next communist revolution, and therefore it needs to be purged to make way for the next communist utopia. It's exactly the same nonsense, just for a different time in history. But the mentality that drove it was essentially the same. Make way for the next communist utopia. It's inherently oppressive, and that its ideas of rugged...
Yeah, wow, nice straw man. Okay. He's showing this, like, meme on screen. It's fucking stupid. I'm not even...
Individualism are standing in the way of the next communist revolution, and therefore it needs to be purged to make way for the next communist utopia.
It don't matter.
It's exactly the same nonsense, just for a different time in history. But the mentality that drove it was essentially the same. Because whites are viewed as being on top of the progressive stack in neo-Marxist ideology, with how progressives tend to view things today, it was effectively the same guilt by association with the Confucian traditions of ancient China. Those traditions...
No, man. Rich people are on top, not white people. Strong man.
As part of the ruling elite, or the oppressor group of Mao Zedong's days, and thus those traditions had to be destroyed. And we see the exact same thing with the anti-white far left of today. Exact same game, exact same justifications, exact same fallacies. It's just different collective groups being targeted. And this is a very important thing to highlight whenever you're talking to any MAGA communist types, because they're absolutely falling for a massive scam. There is no such thing as MAGA communism. The so-called conservative communists will ultimately turn on conservatism and blame the old conservative values, all with the justification that culture needs to be reformed in order to make way for, again, the next so-called communist utopia. So don't ever let one of these tankies tell you that, oh, well, Stalin and Mao Zedong, they weren't woke. This is all just a creation of the new left. And we're totally not like those guys. They are completely 1000% full of it. The old communist regimes of the past were absolutely woke. And in fact,
Yeah, they were. Yeah, and it was awesome. Right? Like, dude, look at China before communism and look at it now. All right, which one do you think is better? Which one do you think is nicer to live in for the average person? Damn, how'd that happen?
Korea is still woke. They just manifest the core concepts behind woke ideology in different ways. It is all just collectivist envy directed at the more successful groups, and then from a strategy standpoint that is then used to justify state control. So this all brings us to the question then, how did woke capitalism manage to manifest in the West? Because the more light versions of woke capitalist theory, they effectively just look at it, and they're pointing to a phenomenon that does indeed exist. They're just blaming the wrong thing for it. They use the phrase crony capitalism, and that's not really correct. One thing people often forget to look at is the fact that the West has, interestingly enough, become less capitalist over time. We forget that the percentage of GDP going to the state for socialized programs has increased over the course of, say, the history of the United States.
No, I don't agree with that. It depends on the country. Right? Maybe the West as a whole, maybe. But that's only if you include, like, and even still, no, because the biggest economies are what? California, right? New York. If we're talking just countries, right? The United States as a whole outperforms every other Western nation. Okay, easily. I would assume. Okay, am I crazy? I mean, I know we ain't what we used to be, right? But anyway, the idea that America has become less capitalist since the Reagan admin, that's so crazy. That is so insane, man. Government spending as a % gross of domestic product. Oh, interesting. So it seems that around 1940. Wait. Government spending spiked in the 40s? Wait, I don't remember becoming horribly oppressed in the 40s. I remember that being like a, post World War II economy. That was like the best time to be a American, right? Wait, but here's like a spike, right? Like what's up with that? You're telling me the government was spending more in totality, and somehow it just so happens at the same time, funny coincidence, every American was able to buy a house and 2 cars and a picket fence and a dog and 2 kids on 1 income?
States. And if you were to graph the woke ideology in the West, you would notice that it is roughly the same graph. And the reason this happens is because when you have the state getting larger and larger and larger, then that increases the incentive for companies to use the state to their own ends. And so that's another reason that some big companies, specifically the biggest companies, might go woke, is just to eliminate the competition through the grift of regulatory capture. After all, they can afford the cost to comply with woke regulations, whereas small companies cannot. And woke ideology is a very effective and very sneaky way to justify the corruption of regulatory capture in this way. Passing laws that require equality checkups on business ultimately just adds to barriers to entry. And it adds to those barriers in a way that progressives won't really notice. In fact, they will often complain about crony capitalism while then supporting the ideology that is currently driving crony capitalism. Because of course, the far left progressives of today, the neo-Marxists, they don't actually understand economics, and so they don't actually understand how this power is being used. They know that there is regulatory capture, but they don't really understand that regulatory capture
they don't understand it. I understand.
And so if they were to propose a new regulation that would require businesses to pay a $50,000 permit fee for inspecting for diversity, equity, inclusion, or whatever, the neo-Marxists would of course clap, clap, clap. They would be completely on board with that. And then they would not understand why it is these big corporations seem to be just continuously getting bigger. They just don't get it. They don't understand. The fact that the smaller business can't afford to even pay that fee because the fee is higher than their profit margin, that just completely flies over the neo-Marxist heads. This is probably one of the most hilarious and pathetic things about RedTube, and how they became the man who believes that he's fighting against the establishment while supporting the establishment. It's more than just on a cultural level, but it's also something that they fell for on a power level. They failed to realize that the woke ideology that they themselves were pushing, well, all it really did in the end was just give the big corporations who are in bed with big government better justifications to continue their corrupt activities. Because here's the thing about quote-unquote crony capitalism. It doesn't actually exist, or at least it's not really something you should call crony capitalism. Because capitalism is really just a free trade, and what they're doing isn't free trade at all. But rather what they're really doing is passing regulations that are in favor of the big corporations.
There is a solution to this. Okay, and it's simple. That's the thing. Now, me personally, I think that when a company violates, like what I was talking about earlier, carbon emissions, or something equally as nefarious, right? That, like, perhaps maybe using AI to kill as many people as possible when you're a health insurance company. I think that the government should take your company from the shareholders, seize it from them, and give it to someone else for free, right? Or at a very discounted price. And I think that is actually I think that that's actually a merciful punishment, right? Like, or maybe merciful is not the right word. I think that is I think that's nice, right? I think that's a nice thing to do, right? Because if you were to be harsh on the shareholders that operate this company, you would put them to death. Okay, you would kill them. That's what China does. If a CEO or a major shareholder makes a decision that kills a fuck ton of people, you know what happens to them? They die. They are executed by the government. Okay? I'm not saying that we should do that, right? I think you should just take that person, take away their power, right? That's it. Okay, now to them, that might be a fate worse than death, but it's not. Okay, rich people, they just love to bitch and cry when the government takes their shit. But you're not gonna see me sparing any sympathies for, like, the ultra wealthy. They have fucking yachts and mansions and shit. Why the fuck should I care about their problems? And anyway, it's just fair. Okay, if you kill a bunch of people, if you do a murder by contract, right? If you murder people from words on paper, right, policy that you write, you should be held accountable for that. As it stands, the worst thing that can happen to you, if you are one of these people, if you're a CEO, you work for the shareholders, or if you are a fat cat, a capitalist, the worst thing that can happen to you is you get a fine. You can kill 10,000 people, 20,000 people, 40,000 people. You get a fine. If anything, right? If most of the time nothing happens, right? United Healthcare, nothing happened except for the vigilante murder, of course. But that doesn't count. Okay? Because we're talking about government right now. We're talking about government regulation. And if there were adequate regulation, then that murder wouldn't have happened. Right? if the people who had made those decisions that killed 40,000 people in the year 2024, there would not have been a murder. Luigi Mangione wouldn't have sought vigilante justice. Alleged. Still don't know if it was him. All right, anyway, moving on.
Ultimately designed to funnel wealth from small businesses up to the top. And this is then used to subsidize and provide benefits to the top corporations who've invested the most money into lobbying or policies that would favor.
Oh yeah, but my point is like, egregious stuff like that, you know, take the company away from whoever owns it. But fines should be proportional to revenue, to profits, right? Dividends, perhaps. Like, all of these things should be factors in what the proportional fine should be for the company. That's it.
This is something
we have like all of these people working for the government that exist just to make sure people like me are paying my fucking income taxes. And you want to tell me we can't have people like crunch the numbers on fucking how much Amazon should pay the government because of their carbon footprint based on their revenue? Are you kidding me?
What we call crony capitalism would actually be just more accurately labeled corporate socialism. The way it works is socialist benefits and restrictions of central planning and other communist ideas. They've all been implemented into the economy, but with the caveat that they are strictly only for the big corporations instead of the general public. And the average normie, especially the average...
Okay, well then it's not socialism. Then it's not fucking socialism. That's just capitalism, man. Yeah, capitalism is when the corporations get benefits. It's when the government subsidizes them and their existence, not ours. Socialism is when the government says, hey, you know, maybe we shouldn't let this company kill 40,000 people for no fucking reason. For a chance at marginally increasing profits.
Has serious difficulty understanding this. They can't wrap their heads around why the solution to government corruption is in fact not more government. And the idea of woke capitalism is just another thing that befuddles them. They don't put two and two together and realize that woke capital is really just proof that cronyism is socialism. And so the truth of woke capital, I believe, is it's just a case of confusing cause and effect. Whenever socialist and communist thinking manages to gain a foothold as the dominant ideology, then private businesses gain a incentive to fall in line and pledge their allegiance to the Church of Correct Think. And there's pretty obvious proof of this when you look at university campus ideological demographics. It was actually as early as the 1980s that it became politically incorrect for university faculty to be right-leaning in any way, long before what we call woke capital started. Rather than capitalism leading to wokeness, it was actually socialists taking over intellectual institutions who then use their elite positions to change society in ways that would be more in favor of socialist ideology. It was all of that.
This is just a Nazi talking point. That's what this is. Okay. Now, it's true across the board. Throughout all of modern history and contemporary history. The more educated you are, the more likely you are to be a leftist. Now, that doesn't mean that you're smarter. That doesn't mean that school is indoctrinating. It just means that the more facts you engage with through rote memorization about existing in society, the more likely you are to hold left-leaning views. Okay, and this isn't like a phenomenon that we just started seeing. This has been happening like throughout all of time. Okay, people who are like more well-read, who engage with more theory, scientific theory, they are more progressive. That's how it works, man.
That caused a lot of companies to go woke. Some of the companies, as I mentioned earlier, were just doing it as a part of a PR campaign and advertising by shifting their advertising focus to the Church of Correct Think and advertising in ways that they thought, at least, was going in favor of a modern audience. Well, then some of the bigger corporations, such as financial institutions, like for instance BlackRock and Vanguard got a lot of attention for this earlier, well, they were doing it just as a way to stifle competition and gain benefits for themselves through these corporate socialist policies. But this all brings us to the final question, because of course this is 2026, and it appears that woke capitalism isn't really a thing anymore. And the answer is because I think they just went too hard. Because again, what the intellectuals were telling these companies wasn't actually true. The ones who went all in on wokeness, you're just mainly a PR campaign. The ones that weren't too heavily involved in the cronyism, well, what they were doing was all based on something that the populace didn't actually like overall. And so the cultural backlash, as well as along with the re-election of Donald Trump, it kind of signaled to these companies that what they were being told wasn't actually true. And while Trump has overall been disappointing, one thing he also did that was actually somewhat useful was cutting down on disparate impact, which is a socialist policy which effectively makes the equity fallacy law. That's another big reason behind woke capitalism and why it's actually just socialism. Because the whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing, well, disparate impact makes it so you legally have to, as a private business, have some form of DEI in your policies. If you can get sued for causing a group a disparately negative outcome, then DEI is de facto law.
I agree with you that companies interpreted Trump's win in this way, in the way that you just described. But they missed the part where Trump won because too many libtards stayed on the couch because Kamala was pro-genocide.
This is something I've pointed out in some other videos before, and it really needs to be stated again because it cannot be overemphasized. The basic core of wokeness has also been law for a very long time, and the law that drives it very much has its justifications rooted in socialist ideology, and that's one thing that Trump actually did do a decent job reducing. And so thus we're seeing a decrease in woke capital, along with companies like BlackRock completely pulling out of it because they realize it's not actually working out for them. However, it's important to not confuse this and think that this means that woke ideology is dead. The idea of envy projected at success, the core basis of woke ideology, is never really going to go away. The incentive of a loser to point towards a winner and accuse them of cheating, that's always going to be a thing. That's just a part of human psychology. And of course, if you look at academia these days, you'll realize that it's still very much filled with far left progressives, many of whom are still very much true believers in neo-Marxist ideology. Somewhere right now on a university campus, students are likely being indoctrinated into the idea that social inequities between various population groups are the result of systemic discrimination against them. So woke ideology certainly isn't dead, even in the form that we saw during the woke capitalist era. It's just biding its time until it can sprout again. And when it does sprout again, it will likely change form in some way. And so it's important to keep in mind that core basic thing that wokeness is, because the next time it comes to life, it's going to be the same idea. It's going to be the same envy, and it's going to be to some degree some kind of collectivist nonsense, and it will be used to justify authoritarian actions by the state. And the more people who become aware of this fact, then hopefully the better off we will be the next time it manages to rear its ugly head. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you like my content, you can support me on Ko-Fi.
Yeah, your video sucks, man.